Whoa, did you see that? In a game that was already filled with tension, one moment stood out like a sore thumb, and it had nothing to do with the action on the field. It involved a former Minnesota Vikings cornerback, Kris Boyd, completely losing it on the sideline and, wait for it, shoving a coach into oblivion. Yep, you heard that right. This wasn't just any temper tantrum, this was next level. So, buckle up, because what we're about to dive into is something you won't want to miss. Okay, let's set the stage. The Minnesota Vikings season is officially over after their loss to the Rams. But just because the Vikings are out of the playoff picture doesn't mean the drama has stopped. Oh no, the NFL is still serving up its fair share of jaw-dropping moments. And Kris Boyd, who you may remember as a former cornerback for the Vikings, is right in the middle of one. Boyd, now with the Houston Texans, had a bit of a rough start to the AFC Divisional matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. It all kicked off during the opening kickoff when the Chiefs nearly took it to the house on special teams. A tackle was made, but not before a fumble nearly resulted in a turnover. And guess who was in the thick of it? Yep, Kris Boyd. Now, this could have been just another routine special teams play. But no, Boyd had other plans. After Samaje Perine recovered the fumble for Kansas City, Boyd had a complete meltdown. And by meltdown, I mean losing it. He threw his helmet on the field like he was a 10-year-old after a bad video game session. Alright, at this point, you're thinking, okay, he's frustrated, but it's early in the game. No biggie, right? Wrong. He wasn't just upset about the play. He was upset at everything. As Boyd walked to the sideline, he did the unthinkable. He shoved special teams coordinator Frank Ross with the kind of force that makes you wonder if Boyd was auditioning for a role in an action movie. At first, it's like, wait, did that just happen? And yes, it did. Kris Boyd literally shoved a coach out of the way like a linebacker taking down a receiver mid-route. What was going on in his mind? Maybe he thought he was still on the field trying to make a tackle, who knows? Now, to be fair to Boyd, emotions were running high. It was the postseason, everyone's on edge. And the Texans were trying to pull off the upset of the century. But come on, throwing a tantrum and shoving a coach? That's a bad look, especially when you consider his history. Let's rewind a bit. Boyd hasn't exactly been known for his level-headedness. Back when he was with the Vikings, head coach Mike Zimmer didn't exactly mince words when talking about Boyd's special teams performance. Zimmer called him out for having more penalties than any player he could remember. And boy, it wasn't pretty. So yeah, seeing Boyd lose it like that on the sideline? It wasn't exactly shocking to some Vikings fans. Mike Zimmer once said, and I quote, "Kris Boyd? He says something about me? I'm like, dude, you had more special teams penalties than anyone I can remember. Ouch." So when Boyd did this on the sidelines, it felt like he was repeating his Vikings issues all over again. Just with a different team. So, what does this mean for Boyd's future with the Texans? Well, let's just say it's not looking great. This is Boyd's 6th season in the NFL. And his 2nd with Houston. And after pulling a stunt like this, it's hard to imagine the Texans keeping him around much longer. Honestly, this could be the last time we see Boyd in a Texans uniform. I mean, you can't just go around shoving coaches, especially one in your own locker room. Emotions are one thing, but there's a level of professionalism that's expected. And Boyd didn't exactly deliver. You can expect the Texans to seriously reconsider their options after this incident. Now, let's zoom out a bit. What does this incident say about the emotional state of players in high-stakes games? The intensity of playoff football, especially in divisional rounds, can bring out the best or the worst in players. But let's be real, pushing a coach is never the answer. It's something Boyd's going to have to answer for, not only with his team but with the fans who saw this whole thing unfold. And speaking of fans, let's take a quick look at what Twitter had to say about the incident. Some people thought it was funny. Others were just shocked, but I think we can all agree. This was one of those moments that leaves you thinking. What just happened? So, what do you think? Should Boyd face disciplinary action for the shove? Or is it just one of those heat-of-the-moment mistakes that should be forgiven? Either way, it's definitely not a good look for a guy who was already on the hot seat. Drop your thoughts below. Was Boyd's meltdown justified? Or is this the final straw for his career with the Texans? Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed the breakdown. And hit that subscribe button for more NFL drama. We'll catch you in the next one. Texans Kris Boyd explains tossing helmet. Shoving coach. I was lit. The Houston Texans divisional round playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs started with a high-energy kickoff return by Nico Remigio, who took the ball 63 yards deep into Houston territory before being tackled by Texans cornerback Kris Boyd. However, the sequence that followed would quickly spiral into an eventful moment for Boyd, marking the beginning of a game he would not soon forget. The penalty and the helmet throw. After Boyd's tackle on Remigio, which forced a fumble, the Chiefs would recover it. Boyd threw his helmet in frustration. This emotional reaction resulted in a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty against the Texans. The penalty brought the Chiefs closer to the red zone, where they ultimately converted a 32-yard field goal by Harrison Butker. This early mistake was not ideal for a Texans team hoping to pull off an upset in a tough playoff matchup. Boyd, clearly upset with the situation, headed to the sideline, but the drama didn't stop there. The shove to special teams coach Frank Ross. As Boyd made his way off the field, he shoved special teams coordinator Frank Ross. The shove was more than a minor nudge. It appeared to be a full-on push. Likely in the heat of the moment, it wasn't the kind of look the Texans were hoping for early in the game, especially from a player who should have been focused on the game at hand. However, the situation seemed to calm down quickly as Boyd later took the field again after a game-tying field goal by Texans kicker Ka'imi Fairbairn, and the controversy surrounding his actions started to fade into the background. Boyd explains his actions after the game. After the game, which ended in a 23-14 loss for the Texans, Boyd reflected on his actions and offered some insight into what had led to the helmet throw and the shove. According to Boyd, it was simply a rush of emotion that got the better of him. I was turned, Boyd admitted, acknowledging the emotional high he was on after what he thought was a key play for his team. First play, kickoff. They thought they had a big play. And I got the ball out. And as I'm getting up, I look at the screen. I see nothing but white. And they're all pointing that way. Boyd thought the Texans had secured a turnover. And in his excitement, he was ready to celebrate. So I was like, we got the ball. 2. Turnover. I was just turned. You'll see. I ran up to everybody, getting ready to shake their hand. But then someone grabbed me and was like, hey, nah, that's not good. You got a flag and it's their ball. The shove and the coach's calmness. Regarding the shove of coach Frank Ross, Boyd was quick to clarify that it wasn't an act of disrespect. Instead, it was simply a moment of high energy. According to Boyd, the interaction between him and Ross was a normal part of their relationship, with the coach trying to calm him down and refocus him for the rest of the game. I love everybody here. I love my coaches. I would never disrespect nobody. Boyd said, I love Frank. I'm a God-fearing man. I respect everybody in that building. Who is Kris Boyd? Kris Boyd is no stranger to NFL fans, though he's perhaps not a household name. The cornerback was drafted in the 7th round of the 2019 NFL Draft. Picked 217th overall by the Minnesota Vikings. He spent 4 seasons with the Vikings before signing with the Arizona Cardinals at the beginning of the 2023 season. Midway through the 2023 season, Boyd joined the Texans. In his 6-year career, which spans 81 games, Boyd has primarily contributed on special teams. He has accumulated 105 tackles, 3 passes defensed, 2 forced fumbles, and 5 fumble recoveries. While Boyd's role on defense hasn't been as prominent as other starters, his special teams play has been a steady part of his contribution to the Texans. In conclusion, Kris Boyd's early game outburst may have grabbed headlines, but it didn't define the Texans' playoff loss to the Chiefs. Boyd himself clearly recognized the importance of keeping his emotions in check, and his post-game explanation showed genuine remorse for his actions. Despite his early frustration, Boyd expressed his deep respect for his coaches and teammates. The Texans now look ahead to next season, hoping that moments like this serve as learning experiences and motivate them to improve, both mentally and strategically, as they aim to bounce back stronger in 2024. Boyd's fiery passion can certainly be an asset on the field. He just needs to keep it in check when the stakes are this high. Texans CB Kris Boyd shoves special teams coach after Houston gives up long kickoff return versus Chiefs. The Houston Texans opening 13 seconds in their AFC Divisional round game against the Kansas City Chiefs were nothing short of chaotic, a play breakdown, a dumb penalty, and even a shove from a player to a coach. Talk about an eventful start. Things got off on the wrong foot for the Texans right out of the gate. The Chiefs' Nico Remigio took the opening kickoff and ripped off a 63-yard return, setting Kansas City up with excellent field position. Texans cornerback Kris Boyd was the man who eventually brought him down, although not before he forced a fumble, which the Chiefs thankfully recovered. At that point, Boyd's emotions took over. Boyd's outburst. In a bizarre and unnecessary sequence, Boyd flung his helmet to the ground, which earned the Texans a 15-yard penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct. But that wasn't the end of his outburst. As he walked off the field toward the sideline, Boyd shoved Texans special teams coordinator Frank Ross in what appeared to be an attempt to get past him on his way to the bench. And no, this wasn't some casual tap. Boyd's shove was forceful enough to grab attention and raise eyebrows. Coaches are there to support their players, not to be treated like a post-play obstacle. And this was certainly not the kind of image you want to project, especially with the cameras rolling. The fallout. How Boyd's actions affected the game. Thankfully, Boyd's teammates stepped up to help calm the storm. The Texans' defense stood tall, preventing the Chiefs from converting the turnover and holding them to a field goal. While it certainly wasn't ideal, the defense did their best to limit the damage after the chaotic sequence, which could have spiraled into a complete disaster. However, Boyd's actions set a dismal tone right at the start of the game. Instead of the Texans getting the momentum, it felt like a clear sign that they weren't ready for the high stakes of facing the defending champions. Their first 13 seconds were a far cry from what they hoped for, and it put them on their back foot before the game had even really begun. Boyd's apology after the game, which ended in a 23-14 loss for the Texans. Boyd was clearly regretful about his actions. He addressed the incident with reporters, offering an explanation for what had happened. "I was just too excited. Did something that I shouldn't have done," Boyd admitted, clearly recognizing that his emotional outburst was uncalled for. Boyd later added that he had already patched things up with Frank Ross. "I love everybody. Like I said, I was lit. I was turned. I thought we had a good play," Boyd explained, "and I apologized to everybody. I apologized to Frank." It's good to see Boyd take accountability for his actions, though this wasn't the kind of distraction the Texans needed when they were already facing a tough matchup against the high-powered Chiefs offense. A costly start to a long road. The Texans were